Hello, this is Chaotic Order, presenting 6 tips for beginner game masters, dungeon masters, storytellers, keepers of arcane lore, and other titles you might prefer. As a disclaimer, I would like to say I'm not an expert, nor will I tell you the absolute truth about running your games. I would advise you to take from this video what you like and leave the rest be. If you like what I have to say, then that's great. If you don't, please be civil and don't leave a bunch of hate comments in the comment section. Thank you. This video is aimed for people who share my love for storytelling, and with those people I would like to share my experiences and tips that worked for me. Feel free to share what things worked for you in the comment section. The first piece of advice I would like to present to you is find a system that works for you. There are more systems than Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and there are more options than one-shots and campaigns that might take years to finish. Games like Call of Cthulhu, Blades in the Dark, or Hunter the Reckoning all provide shorter campaigns that might be more beginner-friendly for a new GM. When it comes to finding the right system that works for you, it is also good to think about what kind of campaign one would like to run. Many people try to modify 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons to suit numerous campaigns, like campaigns set in space or cyberpunk campaigns where there are systems that are already made for such a game that work much better. Again, if you want to run a heist game, games like Shadowrun or Blades in Dark will work just great. If you want to run a horror game, games like Call of Cthulhu, Candela Obscura, or World of Darkness games will work wonders. If you want to run a cyberpunk game, then, Cyberpunk Red, the obvious choice, or again, Shadowrun, both amazing systems that will work just fine. I would also like to say that systems like City of Mist or Blades in the Dark are less rules heavy than, let's say, Pathfinder 2nd edition or Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, therefore might be better suited for a new GM that doesn't want to learn a lot of rules. Another system that I think is worth mentioning is Fate, or Fate Accelerated. Depends whichever you prefer. I think it's a much more beginner-friendly system than many of the others, and also will fit a number of settings that don't have a specific system intended for them. Second piece of advice I have for you is to see how the game is played. There are many live plays either on YouTube, Twitch, or whatever platform you might prefer, and just seeing how other people are enjoying the game and how they are playing it might, be a good learning experience. You can also try to find a beginner-friendly game, joining it, and try to play as a player. That might be a good experience for you too. If you prefer to learn a game system just by reading it and think that's just fine, you're experienced, again, whatever floats your boat. But I think seeing how the game is played live is a totally different experience and totally different learning opportunity than to just read about it on a page of a book. Third piece of advice I have for you is to not reinvent the wheel and to find your passion. This might take a while to explain. Players generally do not care about you being original. They don't care if you created the setting or if you bought a book that already had the setting in it. They care about having fun. Now I know many GMs love creating their own settings, their own characters, and that's amazing. This is where I would advise you to find out what you like about GMing. Is it creating characters? Is it creating settings? Is it finding the right music? Finding character portraits? What floats your boat? What you like? What drives your passion? This is where many GMs, that give advice to beginner GMs say, do not overdo it. Do not do too much prep time. But what does that mean? Personally, I think it means do not spend too much time on things you don't like about prepping. If there are things like, I don't really like creating maps, find some maps on Pinterest, find some maps on ArtStation, find them somewhere else. If you don't like creating your world, you just, like actually to play the game system, there are many places where you can find things that are created by other people. Make other people the hard work do for you, and you do the things you enjoy. When talking about prep time, there is another thing worth mentioning. Many beginner GMs ask, how are you doing that you improvise all these things on the spot? How are you doing that if I ask for a guard's name, you know a guard's name? How are you doing that? Well, you don't really. You don't improvise that. Many of the time you have like a bracket of throwaway things that you pick up when the need arises. Let's say that you have an idea for a gnome with a funny accent, but you don't really know when or where to place him. So you just have him there with a name and with an art, and then suddenly your player wants to talk to this guard and asks for a name. Hey, he is a gnome guard, and he has a funny accent, and your players might like him instantly, and they are like, oh wow, this character actually has a name, and the world is so complex and created, and you just spent all this prep time. Yeah, this is what you do when you have a bunch of throwaway things. Bunch of throwaway art, bunch of throwaway music pieces, bunch of throwaway maps. This is how you stay prepared for the things you cannot be prepared for. The fourth piece of advice I would like to tell you is to collaborate with your players when creating your world. The more of the world is created by your players, the more they will care about it. Let's say that there is a legend of a swordsman that fought off a dragon by himself, and you want to tell that legend to your players because you are really proud of it. Why would they care about it? I don't think that there is an inherent reason for them to care about this piece of lore. However, if there is a sword connected to that swordsman, and it is a really good sword, and it is given to one of your players with, this sword was wielded by a captain that fought off a dragon by himself, and his soul still rests within the sword. You, my liege, are a worthy wielder of this sword. May his soul guide you towards the next victory. Stuff like that makes your players care about these pieces of the lore. Also, if there are things that you already created, make them connect to your players' backstories and make them intertwine. This will make your players care about your world. Another thing I would like to add is when creating your world, create parts of it that you know your players will encounter. Let's say that you have a plan for a criminal organization, but none of your players are playing a rogue or a criminal or a thief or any of that sort. In that case, there is not much sense spending a lot of time creating it. I'm not saying you shouldn't create it, but don't spend too much time on it. If 3 of your players are from a noble background, then it makes much more sense to create some kind of system of nobility, political struggles, what kind of plots and intrigue are at play there. This kind of thing will make your players invested, and they will care about their specific part. And talking about the part your players will be creating, be open to that experience. I know that there are things that I didn't care about when encountering in a game system. When I was playing Vampire the Masquerade, there were clans that I just didn't care about. I didn't care about Tremere. I just didn't get it. I was not interested in them, I didn't care about them, they seemed too kind of complicated, convoluted, and I just didn't see myself playing them. But then another person I knew really liked the Tremere and explained them to me, explained their visions for their character, and suddenly I became invested. I became interested in that aspect of the lore. Let the enjoyment of your players show in your world, and let yourself be infected by it. If you are open to that experience, your horizons will indefinitely broader, and you will be able to create much more interesting experiences. On the flip side of this coin, do not force your vision on your players. If your player likes to play Tremere, do not be like, oh, Tremere are lame, and I will make them lame in my game. You will not have a good time because I think they're lame. This is a bad approach to DMing. As I've said, let your players sell them to you. Let your players sell. Why do you play a Tiefling Rogue? Everybody plays a Tiefling Rogue. I think it's lame. No, I actually have a really nice plan for this character. Look, let me show you. This is the approach of a good DM. Let your players sell their character ideas to you, and let them see what they see. Let them feel the enjoyment they feel for their creations. And that brings me to tip number 5. You are not in control. A GM is in control outside the game, where they are creating the world, where they are doing their prep time, but not within the game. You have a certain amount of control, but not absolute. Your players are always co-creating, even though it doesn't seem like it. If you want to play a very tense heist game, where the stakes are really high, your players need to be invested in their characters and invested in what they are doing. If your players are a bunch of suicidal maniacs throwing their characters into traps and laughing the damage off and be like, oh yeah, I'm dead, that's cool, you're not gonna have a very high stakes, high tension game. If you want to play a horror game and you create all the atmosphere and a scary monster, but your players will just go, oh, that's Dungus, and we will just laugh it off, you will not have the scary game everybody wanted. And be on the same page about what everybody wants. Do not force your agenda on your players. Do not force your vision. Collaborate with them, but also make it their responsibility to keep up with the vision you have all set out to be. If the players start to break that vision, tell them, I get it, it's good to laugh off some tension, but please be in tone with the game. Now, a situation may arise where you and the players had set out on an adventure with a specific tone in mind, but the tone kind of changes and everybody's on board with it, and that's just fine. Let's say that everybody started off as this lighthearted, goofy game where everybody was playing joke characters, but suddenly one of the player characters almost died, and people are suddenly realizing that, we don't want to die and we really like these characters. And suddenly a villain is there and they are really intimidating. It's okay to change the tone of the game if everybody is on board with it. And how you can even have a conversation with your players about it. If you started off as this really scary horror game, but suddenly, people grow invested with their characters, they really don't want them to die and they really like the fun parts of the story, it's okay to be like, maybe this is not gonna be a Call of Cthulhu game, more like a Scooby-Doo game with elements of Call of Cthulhu if everybody is on board with it, and maybe that's what your players wanted all along. This brings me to the 6th and last tip I have for you. Try to learn from your mistakes and from the mistakes of others. What do I mean by this? Well, let's say that there was a game where you were as a player that you really did not enjoy. What was the thing you didn't enjoy about it? And why did it happen? And how can you prevent it from happening in your game? On the flip side, let's say that there was a game that you really did enjoy and that the GM did something that you really like. Try to bring the same thing in your game, because there is a high chance that what you enjoyed, your players at your table will enjoy too. Now, watching live plays and watching other people play can also be of great benefit, because you learn of many things that those players did enjoy and what things to bring to your table. Now, you might also learn about the things those players did enjoy, or what you think, slowed down the game or wasn't super enjoyable, and that's also fine. Learning from other people's mistakes or, just things that didn't work out so well is great. Now, this brings me to one of the most important things in this video. When you will start GMing, you will not be an amazing DM. You will make mistakes, and that's fine. You just need to identify them and learn from them. It is good if you felt like, okay, this game didn't really go as I planned, and I feel like, the players were enjoying themselves, but, there were these moments that slowed down the game. What could have I done differently? What I could have done something that would fix the situation and make it more enjoyable in the future. And this kind of thinking makes you a better GM. Now, of course, you will never be the perfect GM, and there's no such a thing as a perfect GM. But a sign of a great GM is to be able to identify their mistakes in trying to correct them in the games that follow. Now, this is a good thing to ask of your players too. Was there a game they really enjoyed, and what was it about that game that they did enjoy? Again, the flip side, was there a game they really did not enjoy, and what was it about that game that they just felt was off? It gives you a good toolbox of things that to bring back to your game and your table, but also things you should probably avoid. Now, of course, opinions might differ, and what one player really enjoys, other might really hate, and it is probably good to avoid such a thing if both of those players are at the same table. It is possible to create a game where everybody feels enjoyment, and you don't have to sacrifice enjoyment of one player for the sake of another. Now, these were my top 6 tips for beginner GMs. I hope you have learned something new today, and I also hope you have enjoyed this video. This might probably not have been the most original of things I ever do. It's possible that you have learned, one of these tips from somebody else. Again, it's a type of video that many content creators have already created. But I think that it is good to, it was still good to create this video because I feel these are the things that really helped me. And if there are things that helped you on your table, feel free to write them in the comment section. I think everybody can learn something from your experience too. I hope you have a good day and see you next time. Bye.